We now take you live. In fact, where Prince Charles is, well, getting out of the car there to meet some of the people who've been waiting for him as he and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, embark on their tour of Sydney today. It is a very packed schedule ahead. There she is, Camilla, of course, meeting and greeting some of the royal watchers. We'll speak with our Sydney reporter Cameron Price a little earlier, who was telling us that about 100 or so people have been waiting to meet Camilla and to meet Prince Charles. As I mentioned, they have a busy time ahead of them. They start, in fact, they're running just ahead of schedule, 4 minutes ahead of schedule at this stage, of course. They are due to be met by the Commissioner of Police in New South Wales, that's Andrew Scipione, as well as his wife Joy. The Deputy Premier of New South Wales there too, that's Troy Grant. Then His Royal Highness will be viewing the museum while Her Royal Highness heads to go see the stables, the horses in the stables, the police horses that is, and then a display, meet with some of the representatives as well from Riding for the Disabled. They'll be meeting as well with some of the representatives of the Indigenous Police Recruitment, Our Way Delivery and Women in Police too, as well as the New South Wales Police Dog Squad. Now, David Flint joins us, of course, the well-known Royal Watcher. Thank you so much for being part of this with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity, Aaron.
So about 100 or so people so far are standing there waiting. It looks like it's going to be a remarkable day for them.
Yes, it's very busy, it's highly packed, and it's the sort of things that they're very much personally interested in, and I think there'll be a great welcome for them from the people who show that they're being interested in them.
Yeah, now starting to meet, of course, with the New South Wales Police Commissioner as well as the Deputy Premier, as I mentioned too. But a big day ahead in Martin Place later on this afternoon. That's going, we should point out, while there's about 100 or so people there in Redfern, they are expecting crowds of several hundred, if not thousands, in Martin Place, and that will be the big chance for people to I suppose, get up and close with the royal couple.
I think that's true, yes. That'll be the occasion. It hasn't been that well publicised. It only emerged in the last few days, but nevertheless there'll be a big crowd there. Probably not as big as the Queen got on the banks of the Perth River, but certainly big. It's extraordinary, isn't it, that this couple are doing a job like this. It's a very heavy job because this is not the only thing to do. This is only the tip of the iceberg. But they're doing things which most people don't do when they're retired. Oh, thank you. Yes, it's, they are a quite remarkable couple. They are so interested in all sorts of things. They're interested in everything going on, and they do an enormous amount of charity work. The Prince is one of the biggest workers for charity in the UK, and certainly as an individual across the world, and he's establishing a presence in Australia. The concern is basically about young people and the disadvantaged. And in both of those respects, he does an enormous amount of work. He's very much like his father, the Duke of Edinburgh, who did such great work, both in relation to the environment, but also in relation to the disadvantaged and the young. The Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme, for example, was the beginning of that, and the Prince himself has taken up a similar role, particularly for the disadvantaged, not only in the United Kingdom, but especially in the poorer countries of the world, and now that'll be coming into Australia. They are an interesting couple. The Duchess will no doubt cause a lot of interest among the ladies because of the way she's dressed, which is always a matter of comment. And the Prince will put people at their ease. He will talk to them about what they're doing, and I think it's an interesting aspect of our society. And not in any way to denigrate politicians. The politicians play a significant role, but politicians in these roles are often seen as being there for the purpose of getting votes or to advance a particular policy. The Prince doesn't do that, the Duchess doesn't do that, and for that reason they're very well received, and people instinctively realise that they're not there for any personal advantage.
And it's great watching them, of course, watching Camilla being taken around there. Talk to us about this area if you have any knowledge of it. Of course, I'm a Melburnian down here. Redfern, of course, a very famous suburb of Sydney, and this, of course, is the Mounted Division for New South Wales Police.
Well, the New South Wales Police do wonderful work, and the Mounted Police part have been really significant. They're seen on ceremonial occasions where they look magnificent and create very much the right atmosphere, but they also do important police work. You see them, for example, in all sorts of places where it's difficult for policemen on foot to work and you can't really put a vehicle there. For example, I've seen them actually on Bondi, going along the promenade, maintaining a police presence there. And the Duchess and members of the royal family are very interested in horses for obvious reasons, and this will be very encouraging. There's also, of course, the question of indigenous recruitment into the police, which will interest them. It interested Prince William when he came out to Redfern, because Redfern is traditionally, in more recent years, become an indigenous centre in Sydney. And they've shown a great interest in the indigenous people. If you can go right back to the instructions from George III to Captain Arthur Phillip, that he had to take a special care and concern in relation to the indigenous people. Now, relations between the settlers and the indigenous were certainly not perfect, but there was a deliberate attempt on the part of the Crown, and obviously the King himself was interested in this, ensuring that they were properly treated. And this followed throughout the early governors who were insistent upon the rule of law applying in relation to the indigenous people.
Now, David Flint, we look back, of course, in fact, the first visit to Australia by a member of the royal family was back in 1867. Since then, there have been over 50 visits, but before the 50s, there were only about 8 visits by the royal family to Australia. In this day and age, the obvious question, which I'm sure you've received 100 times, if not more, do you think that Australia shows a fondness for the royal family? It's just simply about popularity these days.
I think there's a fondness. I think it goes beyond just being celebrities. I know, for example, when it became obvious that the young were challenging the elderly as being less interested in Australia becoming a republic, it was dismissed. It was said, oh, that's because the young royals are just celebrities. I think people sense more. They sense this feeling of service, this dedication to service, which has been a theme of the royal family right back to before Victoria. And so it was demonstrated very much during the Second World War, and older Australians remember this, that it was suggested, for example, that the Princess Elizabeth, our Queen, and Princess Margaret be sent to Canada for their safety. During the wars, many young children were sent out of London because of the bombings, and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, said, well, they'll never go without me, and I'll never go without the King, and the King will never leave London. And I think people have realised that there is this great sense of service on the part of the royal family, not only in the United Kingdom, but in every Commonwealth country, whether they're monarchies or republics. And this is a wonderful thing, and people realise this, and they realise this about the young royals. Certainly they're popular, they're young, they're good-looking, and William is married.
But do you think that is something that Prince Charles suffers from here in terms of popularity? We've seen the poll which came out yesterday. I know you've commented on that as well. But do you think that Australians do want a King Charles? Because the man we are looking at right here is, of course, the next in line to the throne, as well as his wife. We all remember Diana very fondly. I think I was looking at some YouTube clips of Diana and Prince Charles's visit to Australia during the 1980s. It was a huge event out on on Sydney Harbour. People were packed on the shores, of course, waiting and watching as well. Is it a different tone, a different mood that Australians now have for the royal family, particularly for Prince Charles?
Aaron, I've got to let you into a truth. You become less attractive as you get older. It's one of the hard facts of life. And of course, when you're young and very handsome and very beautiful, you do create more attention than a person who is in the twilight of life. I'm not
the Queen still packs them in, though?
Oh, yes, yes, and so she certainly did in Perth. There was an enormous crowd on the banks of the Perth River. But you mentioned that poll. That poll suggests 51 support for a republic, but it was the question was so loaded. It contained issues, particularly the question of an Australian head of state. Now that's a matter and issue. Whenever the government sends our Governor-General to foreign countries, he always goes as the head of state. He's received as the head of state. They hold him out. The High Court of Australia in 1907 said that the Governor-General is the constitutional head of the Commonwealth, and the Governor is the constitutional head of each state. So it's a disputed area. To put that in the question suggests that the only way we could have an Australian head of state is by changing Prince Charles, by removing Prince Charles. Now, if you ask a loaded question, you get an answer which is wrong. The questions that the pollsters ask about whether Australians want a vague, undefined republic, that's down now in the 30s, and even lower for the young, because Australians are not interested in changing the part of the Constitution which works so well and causes no problems. They're interested in other changes about the governance of Australia, and certainly not this question.
And what about Camilla? The obvious references, the comparisons even between her and Diana have been ongoing for such a long time. I don't know if this is a loaded question, but do you think that Australians, the public here in the UK, in Canada even, will ever love Camilla the way that they love Diana?
I think generally people have realised that Camilla wasn't the ogre she was portrayed in some parts of the British press. She's obviously a very nice woman. And Australians, I think Australians realise that and they accept that. She may not have, she certainly doesn't have the glamour of Diana, but it would be foolish to try and expect every consort of a prince to have the glamour of Diana. Diana was an exceptional woman, absolutely exceptional, with exceptional beauty. And that doesn't happen all the time. And, but I think Australians accept her as a very nice lady, very much interested, and they see that the couple are very happy together, and I think most Australians accept that.
David Flint, we saw the Prime Minister yesterday, Malcolm Turnbull, who of course led the Republican campaign back in the late 90s. He showed Prince Charles the appropriate respect yesterday, would you say, for the awkwardness of what that situation may have been?
I think he certainly received the Prince properly, as one expected that he would, and that's to be commended. That was quite right. His comment afterwards was a little devious, I thought, but
why is that?
Well, he said Prince Charles will be the next head of state, and he knows full well that there's a great dispute about that, and his government will hold out Sir Peter Cosgrove as the Australian head of state when they send him overseas to stir up support for these 2 seats on the United Nations that Mr. Turnbull is seeking. But well, certainly he received him well. I don't think Prince Charles, and I don't think the Queen, is at all disturbed by the